Welcome to another insightful episode of Creatives Chat with Eileen Grimes. Episode 51, Part 2, After Show Convo. Join us as we pick up where we left off. Our show shall begin now. Streaming from Retro Earth Studio and brought to you by wearehistorically.com. Conscious Brand Apparel, and
learn to play jazz piano like a pro, by a pro, with Jazz Piano Pro Essentials at jazzpianopro.com.
Even in terms of the show, like, why Jupiter Rising out of all the houses and movements of the stars? How did that one become the name of the show?
Well, I'll tell you what, because Jupiter is right at the top of my chart. It's right in my career house. And I love it. By the way, I love the Jupiter movement from the Planet Suite by Host. It's absolutely amazingly beautiful. And that's one thing that touched really deep within me. And I've always had Jupiterian experiences. It's kind of how I play it out in the world when it's, in the ninth or the 10th house. Plays out in the world where people see it, so I like having fun on my radio show. It's goofy sometimes. Me and Nathan, my producer, and also the guest, we have a great time, and that's part of Jupiter. And I try to impress or get the perspectives of Jupiter involved with the show, because it's like stepping into your own universe, basically venture into your own universe. But it's also about finding your way through humor and grace, because that's where you find it. When something is funny to you, it's something you'll always go back to because you love it so much. So there's a lot of funny things about astrology. It really is. It's so funny, and I have an astrologer friend on Facebook who's just a riot. She really is, and she's always bringing up stuff that's funny. But, and a lot of astrologers have really good senses of humor, and a lot of them are very artistic, and they're musicians. It's very typical. They pretty much are, yeah. Because remember, the Neptune or the glyphs, the way we read charts is very intuitive, and that's basically how we read musical notation. So it's very similar. So
That's so cool. Well, I mean, I guess the component here that I really want to kind of take the next step in, and we can dive a little deeper into it, is in terms of analyzing your own chart and the shadow work that can be done from it.
Yeah.
What are some of the tools and guides that you point people towards in really confronting those?
That's a tough one because, when I'm talking with a client, I'm listening to their overall story. And if they're gravitating back to one point in their life, a point that's really angry for them, they don't like it, they would rather change it, they'd rather change the person that's involved with it. I have to start there because there's a button being pushed for them, And so if I'm looking at, say, I've seen this happen, I don't know how many times. If I see a woman's chart who has a man, somebody that has abused her, that's very common, and I see that and I ask questions about her father. And the same stuff happened there and previous, generations and generations back. I think that's connected there, So, the way they relate to men, they hate them or they disrespect them because they're going to fully expect that the abuse is going to show up in their relationship. It's a predictive thing. So when people are not aware of their own patterns, they are condemned to repeat it. Just how that is, and, if you're not aware and you're unconscious of it,
I think that's really important for everyone to always recognize, and I hope the listeners take some notes in that sense where it's, we're at the point now where we really have to focus within and really come to love ourselves.
Outside of yourself at all on this, you have to go inside, and it has nothing to do with anybody else. It's just you. It's a highly introspective time.
Well, and that's I know that these things can seem very, tumultuous for people, but it's always important to recognize that like everything is grace. It's lessons that, life is trying to provide for us, not to us. And that's like a huge, subtle, but drastic difference with how we perceive things. And when we come to recognize and embrace life, it really does open up these opportunities and different networks, communities, lessons, insights, and then you can transform yourself. And if you, like I said earlier, it's like, if you don't, it's just going to repeat it, and I like to always think about it kind of like a, like fire on a stove. It's just like, oh yeah, life's going to crank up the heat.
You burn it, your health. So
it's like,
keep doing that, you'll keep doing that, right? Yeah, exactly right. And if you stop doing that, that means you've learned something.
Exactly. And then that's the cool thing about, bringing it back to like the horse out of the barn point, is because once you stop doing it, then it's just kind of like, where do you want to invest all that energy and time into now? What are you going to learn next?
You're like, oh my God, the door just opened to this whole new part of my life I've never done before because I used to do it this way. Now I'm over here and I'm going to, all these doors open for me. That's the whole point of living. Is to investigate those places that you break free of other things to break into. So
I guess this brings it back to the point of, because when I look at charts, it can be really overwhelming, because, basically it's because, again, there's no understanding of the symbology fully yet. We're just like, oh gosh, I got to look into this. I got to research this. But what are some of the kind of biggest moments of people's lives? I think the most common known is like the Saturn return, and like how when planets are in retrograde, like what is the real importance of these astrological events in our lives?
Yeah, you're basically talking about life cycles that happen in everybody's life, and so the first one is the first Saturn return, which happens at 28, 29 years old. And that happens at the beginning of your working life. And then you work to 58, which is the second Saturn return.
The midlife crisis point for most people.
Yes, it is. It's huge because you're at a point where you're looking at, what do I want to do? And you have to use Saturn's guiding, because sometimes he'll guide you into a place, as far as jobs go, that you don't like, but it's going to give you experience to hit you under your belt so you can move on to the next one. Saturn is the best teacher. He is our friend.
Yeah.
He's always been our friend. He's my favorite planet, even though most people hate it, but it's taught me the best lessons, and I have it, in my third house opposing my Mercury. So it's all connected to my wiring of my brain. And so I really appreciate it. I try to give advice to people that's really down to earth, and makes sense, really, really real, not stupid, fantasy stuff. The stuff that when you get into a psychic group and the guys are asking, when's my next relationship? Around the corner for you. And I go, the thing I said, I don't think so. You got to look at where you are now. If you've got a whole bunch of lessons that you're learning about yourself, there may not be enough room for a relationship to be in there, okay? But once you learn that, and then you have to learn about bringing somebody else in so that they can adjust to your life. Because you know what? The thing is, we don't realize this happens. I could talk about the relationship things all night, See, when you look at your life, it's divided into a bunch of pieces of a pie, like on the wheel here.
Yeah.
And one big section is relationships. Now, a lot of people will have maybe 4 or 5 sections for a relationship that should be having other sections there. But relationships are so big a part of their life, 5, 6, 7 houses. God, you don't want them there. You can't really operate that well in other areas, just trying to do something in a situation where you're codependent with somebody else. You have to ask them if it's okay. Okay. So the thing of it is, when you realize that a relationship in your life takes 1/12 of your houses. Okay. It's in one house. It's the 7th house. Okay. When you have something travel into that house, or you have somebody who has planets in your 7th house, you get to visit that little area called relationships. Okay. But other than that, you probably will do something else, because the rest of your life's very full, all the sections in your life are full. But, if you have somebody that comes along who's absolutely wonderful and you give him more and more of your pie, then that's just not good, because you start making decisions based on the pair of you, not individually. So, I mean, this is a whole other subject I could probably write about. I wrote a book, write a book years ago about getting real in relationships, and getting real means you simply have to tell the truth. Is how much space is this person occupied in your life? And do you really want them in all those spaces? No, because you've got other things you got to do. So that means basically that what we're talking about is becoming whole and independent by ourselves. That's what power is having ultimate power in each of our part of our worlds. Each part, we're full power.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
100%. Only way we can do it. And I think that's when you come into that realm of there's no way to have a true interdependent relationship.
Right.
Without having those components, because if one person's super tapped in and the other person's not, that person naturally is going to become codependent upon them for all these other facets of their life and their experience, or turn into a point of rebellion or repulsion. It's crazy how it interplays.
But if it's in your chart to happen that way, that you bring in somebody and you got to go through this time of interlinking that way, that will happen, and that's how you learn how to become more independent that way. But you have to go through that first before you can do that, and so I unfortunately have that interlinked, the Pluto and the Venus stuff. So I meet somebody, I just go, I want them. I can't, I'll die without them, all this. Stuff that I just can't even recognize myself saying that, but it does happen. But the idea here is we're all trying to become fully charged up in every area of our life. That's super empowerment. That's what it really is, when we're doing exactly what we're supposed to be doing on our own. We really don't need any help. So
and that's the thing that right there is, when we do fully, I guess it comes back to even just valuing. I like to use just basic terms of it. It's like when we truly love ourselves, you become that radiating light. And everything else that you need just begins to come towards you. You don't need to have this, I need to go out above and beyond. I need to bend over backwards. It's just like, no, it just, life presents you with these opportunities where like they finally get it. Here you go.
Yeah, exactly. And when you integrate all those parts of themselves, the outer part of the universe will start coming in. You're able to entertain ultimate and alternative ways of looking at things that are really coming from not in your brain, but it's coming from somewhere outside.
I like that though, how it's, it comes back to that point of discernment, where it's really kind of looking at what life's presenting you and how you want to relate with it and how you connect with it. And I think that's the thing of pattern recognition that I've found with a lot of spiritual associated beings and connected beings, is like being able to recognize the patterns and what it means for us, and being like, that it hits something in here.
Yes, that's right. When it hits a nerve, I feel that way about some music that I listen to. Same thing. I love the deeper, sort of darker, more intense composers. I love classical music because I was raised around it and also performed it in college. And one of my favorites is Richard Wagner, who did the Ring Cycle.
I think that's the one cool thing about musicianship, and just I've actually seen it in terms of, from athletics to musical composers to artists, whatever the art form of those who are tapped into creative expression. It's that easiest way for us to really come back to that pure, I call it truth through action meditative state, where it's just your beingness is just so integrated and intertwined and just intimate with the moment of now, whereas you can just really begin to practice that expression. And then that's the funny thing is, when those activities or actions are taken out of someone's life, then it becomes this, I don't know what to do. Like, I see a lot of chaos start to happen. So it's like, get back to the creative passions. That's like the easiest way to tap into the source.
It is really the easiest way, and it's the most profound way to the soul. It does so much for the soul. And I have this composer who comes on every 6 weeks. He's a composer, writer, and astrologer, both, kind of like me. And was really lucky that I met him. He's on Facebook. He lives in New York, and he's on my show every 6 weeks. We do a composer every time. The last time we did Richard Wagner, and time before that we did Schumann, and before that we did Gustav Holst, which is just, Gustav Holst to me is the best. He wrote the Planet Suite. So if you want to listen to a suite of pieces that are written about the astrology of the planets, you should listen to that one.
Ooh.
The Planet Suite.
Interesting.
Yeah, Gustav Holst, amazing. It really, really is exquisitely beautiful. And he really captured each energy of each planet perfectly.
Wow.
Yeah, because he was an astrologer too, turns out.
That's so cool.
Right, he composed at the end of, or the beginning of last century, about 1914 to 1918. And the first one he wrote, which is Mars, is the god of war, obviously. And that is something about that piece is just makes your hair of your hand stand on the back of your head straight up, because you could just feel, like a pile of people that are moving in formation with each other, going into battle, and you could just see that. You could see it and feel it, and the way he did it is just like amazing. I have the recording of it in my car. I listen to it on the way up. It gets me pissed. But
let's go. Just get you.
Let's go. And then the Jupiter movement's extraordinary too. So that's the most popular of all the movements in the planetary suite. Evidently, there was a situation where he was conducting the planet suite, and they were rehearsing the Jupiter movement, which turns out it's the most popular movement from that whole thing. And they were rehearsing it in a concert hall, and Holst was conducting. At one point, they were practicing the Jupiter suite, and all the women that were charwomen and maids and all that kind of stuff, they were all in the hallway, and they started dancing to the music. So Jupiter, and you can really do that with that piece. You can just get up and dance and put your mops down and just dance around. Pretty amazing.
That's so interesting. Well, it's just this undertone that it's the subtleties of life and experience that reveal the greatest teachings. And astrology really is one of the most blatant subtleties right there. We're amidst the stars. We are stardust, like we are one with the universe. And we have such an ignorance, like the absence of knowing of just this powerful tool and compass.
Yeah, we do. Because, astrology is basically about the archetypes, which are the planets and then the signs. Those are all psychological subtypes, because Mars is, the ruling planet is the motivation, that the sign is trying to go through. And then the planet itself is the actual psychological framework, that the person is learning about through the sign that it's in, and so it's interesting when you get an Aries and a Pisces together in the same room. They aren't exactly on the same frequency, because Mars and Aries, they're always learning about doing stuff first. I've never done that before, so I got to do this. Okay. And and Pisces goes, oh, well, maybe I'll try that later on when I go out to my cloud and meditate. And then Aries is, yeah, right, and whose army, type of thing. So there's a fundamental difference between each of the signs as they compare yourself to them. But when you line them up in your chart and you see the presence of each one of them in your chart, that that's what you have to work with, your psychological archetypes within you that are going to play out in certain areas. And it's funny because we're very complex people. That's complexity. So,
well, it seems like there's multiple layers to it too, because they're all, again, so I always kind of think about it almost like a 3D chessboard, right? You have the different, you have the 12 houses, but each one of those 12 like you see the 2D representation, but in truth, it's just like it layers itself because every thread is connected to each house.
Yeah, it is, because first of all, you have the house, then you have the planet, and then you have it in the sign, and then you have the aspect that's making to other planets. So there's 4 layers right there, and those connect to those other planets over there, and you read those along with those. It's complicated, and so I've gotten to the point where when I do a scan, like your chart, I went 3 planets in the ninth. Okay, we're talking about Jupiter here. Okay, so where else is Jupiter playing out? Oh, we have Jupiter in the 8th conjoined the South Node. That means he's had lifetimes of Jupiterian experiences. Okay, so all right, so that's cool. So you're getting 2 areas of your life involved with it. Your 8th house, which is your soul and your past life, what you've learned up until this point. And then you have your 9th house, which is about philosophy and education, higher education, actually. And also writing and teaching. Teaching is also another part of this. So when you're on here, you're teaching people. So that's a big part of your life too. And then you have the personality over here in Sagittarius. You're going, wow, there's another point in your life, how you meet and greet people through the Sagittarius archetype. So you have a lot of it playing out, in more than one area, which is wonderful when you have that. If you have them all over the place and you got, one here, one there, and they're not even connected, that's kind of hard to integrate. But you can easily integrate these things. Very good. So as long as you're doing the Jupiterian things and you've got Jupiter, if you know what you got to do is to get the thing and put it on the refrigerator, but also get a symbol Jupiter and put it on your briefcase or put it on, on your notebooks, whatever it is, because Jupiter is your touchstone.
And you want to know what's super funny though? Like my favorite number, and I mean it's still one of my favorite numbers, and it's like even in numerology, my number is 4.
Okay.
So like the fact that like the Jupiter symbol to me represents looks like the 4, and
right.
Like it has and I've even drawn even as a kid I remember drawing different fancy swoops, and apparently I've been drawing Jupiter my entire life.
Well, it's interesting if you have been paying attention to the was it the Voyager up there on Jupiter right now? I can't remember which one it is, but they've taken some new photographs of Jupiter, and they're extraordinary. You should really look at them. You just type Jupiter, look at new photographs from whatever it is, and they're extraordinary. The atmosphere is so tactile, it's so texturized that it's something that you don't even expect to see when you look at the atmosphere.
And it's interesting because even the storm spot is changing from the last time I checked in with things, and the space people that I follow. And I think that's, there's so much transformation in the cosmos right now. I really do see that this is an entire time for everyone to really look within again and just see where the avenues they're lacking. I find that that's one of the things that I was consciously working on with this recent solar eclipse and the lunar eclipse as well was, okay, so what parts do I really want to just transform, because habits, I see them, they don't die, they just get transformed. The aspects of our nature, they get transformed into something. We can empower ourselves. And I've been doing a lot of we speak of like the psychic things and openings and things kind of coming up, and I've been doing a lot of dream work and asking for spirit before I go to sleep, really focusing on, okay, so what are some things that I don't know about myself that I'm not aware of that I want to really heal from and liberate from, and then boom, having a dream that reveals something like, oh wow, I didn't think that was still in my life, and then waking up and feeling way different. It's crazy what's opening up for people.
Well, it's amazing because you're finding that out, and the thing that you have to do with all the things that you learn, your 3rd house Mercury is learning about all the little details in life, okay, and not how they're all interconnected. But your 9th house is going, how does all this stuff work with other things that I'm doing, okay, and see, to find a context in which you can hold all that into a belief system, and if you do that, you find the context, you find everything. The next thing you have to do is teach it.
Interesting.
You must teach. You have to teach. You have a teacher's chart, you have a writer's chart. So you got to be doing that. If you don't teach, you'll be missing out on a hell of a good experience, because you learn so much more about your subject when you teach it. For those who can't teach, type of thing. Well, yeah, but you learn more when you teach. I have a degree in teaching, so I went and got that before I did anything astrological. But I remember the first time I decided to teach an astrology class, I just said, well, I think I'm going to teach an astrology class. I know enough. Who knew? I didn't know. But, and when I wrote my very first article, I said, you want to write an article about it? It's like, well, I don't know. I can't write. Wait, I could write it. I can write it. Not really thinking that I couldn't, but that's kind of a part of my chart that sort of says, if you go in those directions, if you go that and build it, they will come. Okay. Yeah. So, I did both of those things. And the first astrology class, I had 35 people in it. I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
It's like, hard to believe. It was at my former church, but, it was amazing how wonderful that was, and I loved, this is the thing I love the most about it when I'm teaching. Okay. This is something you have to remember. And this is something I did not know about before I started teaching. When I broke everything down into categories like planets and signs and houses and stuff like that. Well, when I was talking about the planets, okay, I would say, okay, Mercury's about this, Mars is about this, Jupiter's about this. And so I came up to the planet Neptune. And the funny thing was, I started talking about Neptune, and I looked at everybody's faces, and they all were spacing out. I said, I'm doing something wrong. They're bored. What's the matter, guys? And I didn't really realize what was going on. And also when I was doing Mercury, people got more chatty. They were talking back and forth, and then when I was talking about Mars, they got kind of pissed at each other. And I said, this is interesting. In other words, this basically means that each of the planets are not just planetary things in ourselves, it's energy. It's a specific type of energy that shows up when you start describing it. And that was one of the major lessons that I learned from teaching that just blew me out of my socks. I couldn't believe it. And so it was about a year later, I went to an astrology conference, and I was talking to one of the best astrologers on the planet. His name is Stephen Forrest. And I was talking to him about teaching a class, and I said, is it normal for them to start acting out the planet? And he said, not only if you're a good astrologer, that's what they should be doing. I said, oh, okay. I had no idea, but it was so exciting because you see that happening when you're embodying the energy, and when you're talking about all the facets of that energy, your audience will start doing it right in front of you. You can just watch it, Neptune was just so funny. People just staring like this.
Doing something creative in here.
That's totally Neptune Pisces, right? They got their eyes bugged out. I said, are you guys there? No, we're not here. No, we're just keep going, But it was just the funniest thing. But then I realized how important it was to realize that each one of the planetary energies, each one of the signs, each one of the houses, it's all energy. It's all energy that manifests in our lives. And we can tune into it and see what we're doing, and become aware of that sometime. Let me tell you, you can.
So I have a kind of like a random question. I can't remember where it was. I was listening to, I can't remember which podcast, but it was ancient history aspects, and there was talks of almost like a 13th sign and a 13th house. I'm curious, do you know anything about that, or is that even is that worth diving into?
It's, it always seems like somebody comes along and tries to rewrite the rules of astrology, that people don't know about it, and it always seems as though somebody wants to invent a 13th sign, and unless there's a 13th planet out there, which I don't know about. But, the thing is as we discover them, we have to turn the reverse around here. So we're going to go out and try to find another planet so we can change all of astrology the way it's been written. That's what people want to do, because that basically they're trying to invalidate it, right?
Yeah,
that's what I'm thinking you're doing. So the idea here is that when we are embarking on a new prospect of new consciousness coming on the planet, there's always a planet that shows up. It's the reverse of that. When Pluto was discovered, We were working on the nuclear bombs. We were working on, it's sort of the society reflected the nature of that Pluto. Pretty soon we were going to find it. Okay. So I think what else was happening during Pluto? It was, the prohibition. Things were just really stuff. The obviously the depression. All those things are Pluto's domain. Okay. So that was happening, and I think it was 1930, I think 1931, that it was discovered. And they found it up there. Its orbit was disturbing Neptune's orbit. It's a tiny little planet, but it packs a punch, So it has a very small orbit, but it does affect other planets in the area and their orbits. So, so here you have all the planets orbiting this way, and then you have Pluto, which orbits this way. It goes elliptically. It has a very strange
wonky orbit.
Yeah, it's elliptical, it's elliptical. So it's at one end, it's got the planet, and then all the rest of it's out back here behind it, So they knew something else was out there because of Neptune's, orbit being altered, and then also the thing about Uranus, which is really damn funny, okay? Because Uranus is the planet of the weird stuff, right? It rules Aquarius. And, when they discovered, the planet Uranus, they found out that this planet's not like all the rest of them. Figures, doesn't it? Okay. It orbits to the vertical. It does not orbit to the horizontal. It's orbiting to the vertical. It's flopping on its side, and it has rings around it, but it's vertical. So each of the planets have the quality of the planets that we talk about in astrology. So
this is why, this was I nerd out with my different clients and stuff, and we got into talking, the cosmos and ancient history and all these other aspects of just things that are kind of coming to fruition now. But it was I also nerd out in my spare time and just different things, and I found this. I think it was Caltech. I think it was their physics department. A few other astrology and physics departments were kind of finding evidence too. But this is why I think it's incredibly funny that you just said that, where when we're entering new consciousness, another planet could also potentially emerge. Yeah. And they found evidence for that planet 9 that people have been talking about for so long. So that's where I'm like, wait, what? So they want to look more into it, and they're still trying to determine things. But essentially it was there's distance things that would be, its orbit would be obviously even more vast than Pluto, but
it's going to be beyond Pluto's orbit, right?
Yeah, but it's even that concept where it's they've just, the way they tracked it was that they were seeing different local clusters starting to get pulled towards certain areas. So they're like, oh, okay, so this is interesting. And then they're zooming out and scoping and trying to doing their algorithms and all their programs and being this could be what people are talking about. And it's just yo, what if, again, the new consciousness comes through, that's bam, validated right there.
Right. When I think is when we are on the verge of discovering something completely new, consciousness wise, philosophically wise, physically, everything. I mean, you're talking about back when Uranus was discovered in 1781, that was right at the beginning of the American Revolution. It figures, it's whatever is going on the planet, it's being mirrored up there on the planet, up there.
Wow.
So, it was 1781 when, I guess it was the Civil War or whatever else. I don't know my history that well, but it does seem to be, it manifests, the Revolutionary War was a part of all that. That's when they revolted against, the North and the South revolted. So that's a very Uranian thing to do, is to come up against, the typical structure of the rule of a country and basically break out and do something different.
Yeah. So I guess that's the kind of thing is, astrology on the practical terms. I always try to encourage people, it's don't hold on to concepts in a sense where you're going to manifest them so that your life is stuck in boundaries. But in terms of daily use and application of astrology, what are your views on the daily horoscopes and all these different things? Or are you more so if you really want to get down to the nitty gritty, look at your chart, really understand what your chart means?
The thing is about astrology is that when you have the cookbook stuff, That's basically formulas, this formulaic stuff that everybody writes about it. You have Venus in Aquarius, that means you want friends for boyfriends, okay? But if you're looking deeper at what a Venus in Aquarius is, you're going to go, okay, it means that the person feels as though they don't want intensity. They want to have freedom in their relationships. And the way they do that is they stay detached in a relationship. That explains it a little bit more, And so, and that explained a lot about me, where I was trying to do relationship, try to go really intense in the Pluto side. And I try to get completely enmeshed and kind of sloppy and icky and sloppy boundaries. And then bam, I'd slam to the other side where my Aquarius Venus was. And I go, I'm sorry, I have to go now. I will be back in the future. I don't know when. That's what I did this to my last boyfriend. He couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe I did it either. But I said, I got to go. I got to do what I have to do for myself. I said, I'll be in touch. Break up and then get back. It was weird. But, in some sense, Aquarius people have to have an interesting stability within their own life so they can bring in a love relationship that is detached yet very full, So when they get together, they enjoy each other's company. And when it's time to go, you go. That's it. And to me, that's much more healthy than codependency.
Oh yeah, 100%. And it's funny because it's the way you explain it is very much so like, from the formulaic aspect and just the cookie cutter version, it's almost like you can tell by those who don't really know what the ingredients taste like, they're just following the recipe, versus those who really know everything in the kitchen. They know exactly what they're putting in and how much. Because I mean, just even like it's overwhelming for me when I look at it and I break it down, because like the different geometries of a chart too and what it reveals, what's the importance of that aspect, because I see
geometry is essential. It's basically the structure of a chart. And you're looking at the geometrical angles between planets. That's geometry when you're dividing up a circle in two parts, and so when you have a square between one planet and another, that's 90 degrees. That's one square out of a circle. Out of 360 degrees, it's 90 degrees. That's 1/4 of the circle. So there's geometry right there. Or if it's an opposition, it's 1/2 of the chart, 180 degrees. If it's 3/4 of a chart, then it's it's another degree thing, and it takes up three areas of the chart. So it's 3/4 of a chart. So and then you add that psychodynamic in with the aspects, because those are interesting too. I mean, you think you've learned enough already today,
right? Like I'm just there's like
there's more. Well, when you have a square, a first quarter square, which is from the beginning planet to the square point, you have first quarter square. That just shows the beginning dynamics of learning about confrontation and conflict between those 2 points. A square, it's like if you're driving here and here comes the car to the intersection, bam, they hit. That's a square, okay? All right, so but if you have the opposition, that means you've got a point here and a point up here. You're looking here and looking back at this point at the opposition going, okay, they are expressing something of mine that's opposing my viewpoint. And the point is perspective. When we learn that they're telling me something that I need to know about myself from the opposition, and then you have the last quarter square, which is a little bit more evolved. You don't have all this stuff from the first and the second square thing. It's more evolved, and you do things a little differently. Then you go into the final thing, which is the conjunction, which is when 2 planets are the same degree. That means it's a brand new learning phase for them. So like if you have a sun and moon at the same degree, you're born on a new moon, and you are, learning the concepts of the new moon, which is finding out your own emotional self. It's about you, If it's opposing, you're learning about them. So, it's funny when I'm talking about all this stuff. I had no idea I've learned so much,
Right? I was like
up there, But it's such a great system, and it works beautifully well. And one of the things we can really learn about is the phase of the moon somebody is born under. Really can.
So I dive into it. So what's the difference? Waxing, waning, full, new.
You were born just short of a full moon, and you're born on what we call a gibbous phase of the moon. It's sort of like an opposition, but you have something over here, just about ready to hit the opposition, but not quite there. So there's an adjustment that has to be made between those 2 points. You can't just flip from one opposite point to another. You've got 2 points that are the same, but they're having to be adjusted for. So it's an interesting. It's an interesting way to look at it. And also, equally, if you're born at the point, here's the new moon, and here's your moon going all the way around and stopping here just before the new moon is born at the what's it? Oh, maybe that is the gibbous phase. Yeah, it is. I'm sorry, the gibbous phase wasn't this is gibbous phase. Thank you very much. It's the last phase before the new moon, and that is like a Piscean aspect, so it's more spiritual when you have planets at those relationships to each other. That's just something more, something else you got to think about when you're reading the chart.
It blows my mind, because then I started to think about the ancient cultures that knew all this stuff, that were using these different aspects, and that's even more wild to me, because it's like Sumerian cultures, like I know one big one that a lot of people, I always try to pitch and push it, just because when you learn more about the Dogon tribe, it just blows my mind more and more and more, because it's like they knew all this stuff too. And then quantum physics, they knew all that stuff. They understood the Sirius rotation of like 2 stars and all this other stuff. So it's like, when we think about this ancient knowledge, it's fascinating just to know, it's like, wow, they knew a lot more about, in my opinion, obviously, of what really tapped us into life, and that really gave us the empowerment tools.
It really did. Yeah. And I mean, some of the people, like the 3 wise men, were 3 astrologers, by the way.
Right?
They were, in case you didn't know that. And they actually mention it in the Bible, but they don't talk about it that much. So some of the greatest collection of astrological literature is in the Vatican.
Yeah.
And, it's all hidden there. Nobody brings it out to look at it. Oh, good, let's look at these. No, they won't let you do it. But the key thing here is when Jesus was born, supposedly on the 25th of December, which wasn't true. He was born sometime in Pisces,
Right.
And what happened is that there were 6 or 7 planets all at a declination in the sky, all going out away from each other in the same part of the sky, which is a big rarity, huge rarity. And like the sun, and you had the moon, and you had Mercury, and all behind each other. If you looked at them straight on, it would look like a big star, like the North Star. Hello.
Wow. Yeah.
Star for you. So it was, it was an interesting. If you look at Jesus's chart, which I actually have at home, it's an incredible chart. It's like 6 or 7 planets all together in Pisces. All stacked on top of each other, which makes total sense with his life the way it was. So but when you have that many stacked up, you have the energy of each planet is magnifying the one next to it. So it doesn't happen that often, very rarely. This is happening in about March 7th, I think March something in 7 AD when it took place. So
wow,
that's what I've heard anyway.
Yeah, that's still fascinating just to think about these aspects. And I think that's one of the cooler things about astrological history. The more that we have the different programs that are able to actually calculate all these things, we start to see all these different events lining up with all throughout history, from different comets passing to the different eclipses to all these different like transformations of society and existence. It's fascinating stuff.
There was one thing I haven't told you about. This is actually how you can use astrology to actually chart what's happening right now. This was back in 2001, September 11th.
Wow.
I was watching the chart that day that the buildings came down. Okay. And I was talking to somebody online. I was talking to a bunch of people online. We're all talking about what was happening, because every time a major thing happens in the news, astrologers, they go right to their computers and get and talk to people, kind of sharing what they know. And so I was talking to one of them, and they said, when was it open? When did they first open the Trade Center? So it was about 29 years ago. I went, oh, and I said, really? So I found the approximate date. It was 1970 approximately, I think. Yeah, I think that would have been about right. That they opened the first building. And I can't remember the date it opened, sometime in March or April or something like that. And I looked at that and I went, then I looked at the chart that happened that day. And I laid it on top, and there's a Saturn return hitting a Saturn, just like that.
Wow.
That building was having its Saturn return. And you know what sign it was in?
Mars. Or no?
No.
Pluto.
Gemini. Look at the symbol for Gemini there. Twins. The two Roman.
Wow.
We were all freaking out about that one that day.
Yeah, that's nuts.
I thought that was crazy. It was right on it. I mean, to the minute, And what I couldn't help thinking is that the way those buildings were constructed, they were constructed with all the core stuff in the middle, but the outside, it was kind of uninvolved in the structure, and I thought it came down relatively easy. Both of them did. And so that had a lot to do with the structure of the building, and that's Saturn, when you're talking about that. So,
that's so crazy.
And, they both came down on their Saturn return. They weren't, usually what happens when the Saturn return happens, people basically have to go talk to Saturn to re-up their lease. Says, okay, I've gotten this much done. How have I done, Saturn? Well, sounds okay, but you got to work on this and this and this. Okay, fine, send me in. But that usually there's lessons to learn on those types of things, and they're kind of difficult. But this is what Saturn did with the Trade Center. They pulled the Trade Center in with a meeting with Saturn, and Saturn said, "You ain't doing a good job here." I said, "Well, what do you mean? I'm sorry, but we're just going to have to pull you down," and they did.
Wow.
They didn't earn their stripes with Saturn. Whoever built it didn't do the right things with it, so to make it stronger. So that's my opinion. I'm sticking to it.
That's so interesting to see. Again, it's just there's so many layers to all this. It's fascinating. It's such a rabbit hole. I love it.
I know. The first time I looked at it, I went, "Oh my God, you got to be kidding!" The symbol of the the towers, there they are. There's Gemini right there, and it was amazing. I thought, and I told everybody online, yeah, it's getting the Saturn returns, the Saturn return. Everybody goes, wow. Everybody's just kind of freaked out. But I think somebody else found it at the same time I did, but it was amazing. It really was. You can apply astrology to anything.
Yeah, that's the thing. I was going to say, it's like literally there's so many applications of it are limitless, just depending on what you want to do.
That's called mundane astrology. You're applying it to countries or cities, or, the beginning when a city starts, you can apply, for one thing, we know that Seattle's a Scorpio city. And Washington is a Scorpio state. It's double Scorpio. So,
weird. Well, I guess, how does that interplay with the different vortices and vortexes of just different energies and like the ley lines? Like, how can you incorporate that in astrology?
Well, I'm not sure about that. I do think called astrocartography, which is the kind of the ley lines of where you are when you were born. Are you under any planetary activity, that type of thing. And I really don't know about how planets were where they were back then. I just know that the relationship to each other, what they were doing. But I know that I think if I were to look at for instance, a city astrology map of Sedona, for instance, which has got buku, everything there, tons of vortices, everything. If I were to look at that, I'd see that, particular characteristics of that particular city in that chart. Probably would see it.
So when you say like the Seattle's in Scorpio and Washington's a Scorpio state, how do we know that?
Because
because I'm just like, wait, what? Like,
Okay, and so what you do is that you figure out the, city or state charter sent, when you set up the state, when it's ready to do business as a state, you set up a chart for that date. And that was like November 12th, something, 1889, right around there. And I think not too far after that is the date of November 13th, 1889, or something like that, for the city of Seattle. That's the city charter signed right around then. So that's when you do your charts for cities.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing when you look at this, like Venus, for instance. Venus is the rulership of, aesthetically beautiful women and beautiful anything. And California is a Venus. It's a Libra state, so it's totally under Venus, and everybody is about good looks down there. So you can definitely tell that, and the other thing is that Oregon is a Aquarius state. They're the weirdest people down there. I swear. They are. They're weird. The way they construct their buildings down there, it's just the strangest thing I've ever seen. And they have very, very different sort of laws down there. I'm trying to find that. I wish I could find it, because it's a little piece of paper I got from somebody that, it's a reference point. But, you find when you look at all the different cities and their applicable signs that they're under, it fits, totally fits, the personality. So, yeah.
And then the energies are drawn there, the lessons that people go to that area to learn things. And
yeah, they go down to Oregon to learn about, being rebellious,
Right.
They do. They have all sorts of, things down there that are kind of bizarre, and so, and they're very liberal, extremely liberal down there. So yes, that's Aquarius for you.
That's so fascinating. See, this is the thing. It's just like astrology is this key that just opens up so many doors.
You're seeing all this stuff.
Just like, gotta look into this, gotta look into this, gotta look into that. Like, well, I guess we'll bring it full circle in the sense of, when you're doing the research for your book and you're coming to recognize all these people in the Titanic have these similar directions that their charts pointing them towards. Would you have been able to almost, like, if you knew each person individually, like, foresee that they were going to be a part of this tragic event?
That's the hard part, is seeing things out here rather than from retrospective.
Yeah.
If it hadn't been for, if you could look at all that stuff and say, I think the Titanic is going to hit an iceberg at this time and place, that would be almost really impossible to do. But when you have the event right down in front of you, then you can go back and look to see what was going on that led them up to that point. And it's a little obviously easier to see, but you can't see it the other way. You can't see it from here out that way, it's impossible. Yeah. But you can see like certain types of events which will show up, like, volcanic eruptions. Right now we're having, a lot of them all over the planet, and that's having to do with Pluto and a few other things. Pluto rules volcanoes. So, that's happening. And up in Iceland, they've got a new one that's erupting up there. That's, it's what we expect,
Yeah.
So,
well, I guess that's really, the interesting thing for me is, the theme that I'm receiving right now is just natural disasters, where you're able to actually see, all the volcanic eruptions. Because there's a few people that I follow, and I will let people know right now, there are a lot of volcanic eruptions that have been happening. There's been so many earthquakes that have been happening.
Yeah.
And just in terms of just the solar activity, there's been so much stuff going on. And are these things that you can see kind of happening, or being like, Earth might be experiencing a certain transformational period because of all the energies we're receiving?
Sure. Yeah, and the thing of it is most people don't even give it a chance to give the history of what leads up to that point. In case in point, Mount St. Helens, when it erupted back in 1980, on March 20th was the first particular bit of activity there, when it looped up a couple holes up the top of this, of the cone. And, but everything was leading up to it. There was tons of earthquakes. Okay. Right under the volcano. So there's a pretty good chance we're going to have some eruptive activity. That's just plain smart and science. take into consideration too.
Yeah.
But the thing that happened for me, and when I looked at the actual moment that it blew skyward on May 18th, 1980, I looked at the chart when it happened. I couldn't believe what I found. I just couldn't believe it because, again, that was looking from here back there. Had maybe astrologers looked at the chart at what was going to happen right about 8:32 that morning, they could see, well, something may happen there because right there at the bottom of the chart was Saturn sitting there, putting its grounded feet in the soil, and it was stationary. It was in 2 days with being stationary. And the energy of Saturn is going to multiply and it's going to quadruple. It's going to be more and more intense. And then as soon as it goes retrograde or direct, then it releases itself. But that's a buildup point,
Yeah.
And that's what happens in people when they have stationary planets too.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's wild. Yeah.
I know. I always check event charts, to see what happened. If some major event happens, I want to see what's going on in the sky because it'll usually show. But again, we're looking at it from behind. We're looking back there where it happened, not from here looking forward.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to use it as a predictive tool. It's not that accurate.
Okay.
It was a few days before 9/11. I was having dreams about standing at the foundation of a building and it was crumbling. I said, I've never had a dream like that before. So
Wow.
I thought, well, and then a few days later it sort of happened. But, I didn't really discount it or say that was great. It was just interesting. A lot of other people have the same thing. Same thing happened with the Titanic. There were precognitive dreams then because so many people were on the same wavelength because of the spiritualist times. People were having the feeling the Titanic was going to sink, and a lot of people did. Lots of them did. And it was a real collective event. And when it did, it just said, wow, it was like a kind of a substantiation of the God factor or the humility factor, the hubris factor. But it was something that kind of validated people's things. They were dreaming about it. They actually saw it in their heads. They saw it, and the thing about the astrocartography map, it was showing up in the astrocartography map too. So, and that's another whole science unto itself. That's the science of relocation. So
yeah,
that would take another hour to talk about. So
right, so many downloads. It's just like if there's one thing that I can take away from this conversation as far as astrology is an amazing web. It's just like just so many different layers to it of just these interconnected pieces.
It's huge. Yeah.
It really, again, this is what to me just speaks out to more of this grand divine design that everything is really a part of, because it's like a gear of a clock. Like there's so many pieces moving around. It's like, that's not a coincidence, folks.
No. Yeah. When you look at, the definition of coincidence is God's remaining anonymous.
I love that.
So I always keep that in the back of my mind whenever seeing things seem coincidental, but they're really not, so yeah.
Oh, wow.
We had a lot of fun here today.
Yeah, I was going to say, Eileen, that's crazy. This was an amazing conversation thus far. That's the power of this stuff is
I know.
Imagine if we learned all this as kids.
Yeah.
And that's what we were learning in school with math and music, and we just learned how to do art and expression. And then you learn astrology. Oh, you can learn numerology. You learn all the cool stuff.
It would actually cram your brain with more stuff, but it would keep all the empty points in your head, would fill them up.
And Eileen, thank you for joining us on the after show. That was an amazing discourse on astrology, and I just can't wait for the next time. But, thank you, listeners, for tuning in.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Of
I
course.
really appreciate it. It's going to be great. Thank you.
Yeah. And for that note, roll the outro.
That concludes this episode of Creatives Chat. Thank you for watching. Join us every Thursday at 3:33 p.m. Pacific Daily Time as creative minds get together and chat about who knows what. View more episodes on our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks again to our sponsors for making this show possible. Thank you, We Are Historically, for your conscious human apparel. Shop online at wearehistorically.com.
Hi, I'm Darius Wilrich. I'll teach you everything you need to know about playing jazz piano like a pro with my 12-week online video course and downloadable guidebook, Jazz Piano Pro Essentials. Enroll today at jazzpianopro.com.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, that was a solid one.